was on the mend from my broken leg, I got a call from Motherwell, my old club, who asked me if I wanted to go up there and manage them. And I had been on a course, a management course run by the PFA, and I also had my badge, my coaching badge. So I thought, well, I'm well enough equipped, and I had a long time with no Campbell at Coventry City. So I said, right, this is what I want to do. And up I went to Scotland, took my family back to Motherwell. And I really enjoyed it. I was only a year and a half, but I really enjoyed it, although my family didn't settle, funnily enough, back in Scotland. But I was enjoying the job. I had to clear out a lot of players, to bring new players in, and I was getting a lot of satisfaction out of the job. Right out of the blue, I get a call from Jock Stein, who was managing Celtic, and he said to me, how would you like to go back to England? So I thought, Liverpool, because Bill Shankly had just resigned, 1974. And I thought, oh, they must be wanting me back at Liverpool. He said, Don Reby has got the England job. He said, how would you like to go to Leeds? Now, Leeds United had just won the league that year, so they were the champions. They were in Europe, European Cup. And I said, well, oh, great. Anyway, about a day later, who arrives off a flight from Mallorca with his shorts on? Brian Clough, on his way to Leeds United. And I was very disappointed about that, and Cloughie lasted 44 days. But during that 44 days, I get another call, and this time it's Bill Shankly. Yes, boss. Listen, son, he said, how would you like to go to Portsmouth Football Club? I said, well, what do you think, boss? Great club, son, you know. So he starts telling me all about how good a club Portsmouth were. But he, of course, is remembering in the days when he played against them, and just after the war, when there was thousands at Fratton Park, and you know, they had good teams, and you know, there were cup finalists and league champions, and I'm thinking, well, they're not really that now. They're a second division team, and they haven't been doing anything for years. But he said, the chairman wants to talk to you. So the chairman arrives in Motherwell, comes to my house, Mr. Deacon and his wife, and he sells the club to me. He puts me in promised land. He says, we've got X amount of thousands to buy players. We're going to go to a new stadium. So I really couldn't fail. So I tell my chairman again at Motherwell, and I go to Portsmouth. And I get down there. I always remember we drove down there, and my first game I met the players was down at Nottingham. I got introduced to the players. We played the game that night, and Pompey won, beat Nottingham Forest. So I thought, well, this is not bad, you know. I don't even know the players and we're winning. So then I get down to Pompey, and the chairman shows me the site on the outskirts of the city. He said, this is where the new stadium's going to be built. And I thought, well, this is wonderful, because it's, you know, vast area. I said, we'll be able to have practice pitches there, and oh yeah, there'll be training facilities. I mean, it was just going to be absolutely wonderful. And off we go then. So the first few weeks I watch, have a look at the players we've got, assess them, and I go to my first board meeting and I say, well, look, gentlemen, there was a lot of directors at the club at that time. I said, I don't think we've got any decent players. I said, we'll need to, you know, clear out. And the chairman went, oh, well, hang on a minute. I said, well, we need to buy players. He said, well, we can't really buy players. He said, because I've got a financial problem at the moment. And he gave me a letter. He sent a letter to me which said that because of his financial problem, his money was tied up, I think, in land or something. And I've got this letter to this day. It said, if we get relegated, you won't be held responsible for it. Which didn't do me any good, because I wanted to have a decent team. I wanted to clear out the players that were there and get new players in. And I couldn't do it. And the first player I was going to sign was Tony Woodcock, who was then at Nottingham Forest. He was in the reserves. And I could have got Tony for about 10,000. And that was when I realised that we had no money, when the chairman couldn't come up with the 10,000. And I went on then for 3.5 years without buying a player. I mean, it was the most incredible time. Here was a club that were really going to the wall. I couldn't buy a player. I could only get free transfer players or player exchanges. And I did one or two good player exchanges. I exchanged Ronnie Davis for George Graham to Manchester United. So I got George for a little bit. And then I swapped George for David Kemp to Crystal Palace, and David Kemp done me a very good turn. He scored a lot of goals for us, and kept us in the division. But other than that, I was having to bring youngsters in and working with a youth policy of local kids, and anybody could get. So we were working away, and that was the only satisfaction I was getting, was knowing that at least eventually we'll get a team. Now, as these kids progressed and I gradually got them in the first team, of course other clubs then start coming along and having a look and saying, oh yeah, how much would you want for him, and how much would you want for him? So I said, no, I'm not selling anybody. I'm keeping all these youngsters. But the chairman then said, well, hang on a minute, I really need some money, so we'll have to sell them. So we had a big bust up over it, and I resigned. I said, well, that's it. And then I went home and I thought about it, and I came back the next day and I said, look, I'm not resigning. He said, well, you're now then suspended. So I was suspended on full pay. So I'm sitting at home, suspended, getting paid. And it was while I was in this little period, the Granada television came along and said, look, would you come up here and do a little spot with us picking the man of the match for our match? I said, yes, of course. So I would drive up there on the Friday and do the man of the match thing and drive back down to Portsmouth, play golf during the week or whatever, because I'm getting paid. And I was getting paid two places, Pompey and Granada television, so I thought, this is not bad. So the Granada thing sort of grew as the season went on. I started doing a little bit more, and then they involved me in the Friday night show as well. So I was doing Friday night, and I was doing the game on the Saturday. They went out on the Sunday, and I was enjoying the television thing. So finally my contract got paid up at Pompey. Not what I should have got, but I agreed on a figure just to get back working, and that was me away from Portsmouth but working in television. And then ITV for the 1978 World Cup asked me to go to Argentina, which was terrific. So off I went to Argentina, and Big Jack was working with us. Well, Jack Charlton and I went over together. It was some flight. We left London first class, and it took us like, I don't know, about 24 hours or something to get to Argentina. We stopped somewhere. But Jack and I arrived in Argentina, and I had left something on the plane. I went back to the plane to get it and came away with a crew. So I'm in a crew bus arriving at a different entrance. Jack arrives, the TV people are there waiting for him. Hi Jack, where's Ian? I don't know. Jack was still on the champagne, I don't know. So I had arrived in Argentina with a crew, lost to everybody, to all intents and purposes. I wasn't there, they couldn't find me. And anyway, they finally got us and took us to the hotel, and they said, you're on satellite in sort of an hour's time. Well, I mean, we were totally jet lagged. We'd been, socialising up the front in this, and we were in a terrible state. So I'd like to see the tape of the first interview that Jack and I did from Argentina. When we left Argentina after the World Cup, Jack said to me, I'm taking a job at Sheffield Wednesday. He said, how would you like to come and work with me there? He said, with Morris Setters. I said, well, that sounds good to me, Jack. And so we came home, and I joined Jack, and Granada Television wanted me to go full time with them, but their offer was very poor, so I said, no, I'll leave it out. I'll go back into the game. And I had a year there with the Wednesday, and what was a great year of football for me, with Jack and Morris, and a big lad called Tony Toms, who was the trainer, who's one of the funniest guys I've ever met in football. And they were a great crew to work with. Jack is just, incredible fella, and we really had a smashing time, and the team were doing well into the bargain. But just at the start of the season, the head of sport, John Bromley, came up from ITV and said, I'd like to talk to you, to Jack. He said, you as well, Jack. So we all sat down, and he said, Brian Moore is packing in doing on the ball. He said he's done it for years, feels that he needs a bit of a change. He said, I'd like Ian to do it. He said, but you need to get off, Jack, to get down on a Friday. So Big Jack, being Jack, went, well, I said, well, okay. He said, work here during the week and go away on a Friday. So I thought, well, that's not a bad idea. So off I went on a Friday and did the first on the ball live World of Sport And I'd never done that before. I'd never done anything live. I hadn't done anything on Naughty Cues. So I'm really fronting a programme with no experience at all. And, when I think back on it, I must have either had a lot of bottle or I must have been daft. But it obviously worked quite well, and I did a full year there. Would go after the programme, I'd go to a game and see a team that we might be playing, or look at a player, or do a little bit that way. And at the end of the year, ITV said, well, we'd like you to be full-time. And Jack and I discussed it, and he said, well, I'll leave it with you. And I said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do, Jack. I'll take up the television because, if it doesn't work out, I'll always come back. I'd like to come back. And he said, okay. So we left it at that, and I then took up a television offer, and I've been working in television ever since. After the 1982 World Cup, I had been over in Spain working, and Jimmy Greaves had been on the panel back home and had made a big impact. And everybody was saying, oh, little Greavesy, how great and how funny he was. So our gaffer, John Bromley, said, how can we incorporate him into the On the Ball? Because he was working up in the Midlands on a Saturday morning doing Tiswas. And so we'll do a live link. So Jimmy's up there in the studios in Central, and I'm down in London. And in the show I would say, well, let's go up and talk to Jimmy up in Birmingham. So Jimmy would pop up on the screen, and we would do a little two-way chat about something. And that was it. So that little spot sort of gradually grew as the year went through. And at the end of the season, Jimmy's contract had expired on Tiswas, so he was free to come down and join me. So we sat together in the studio for the first time the following year, and the partnership went from there. And then World of Sport finished. They took everything off the air except the football. Producer at that time was Bob Patience, and he said, look, the fact that we're standing on our own now and there's no World of Sport, he said, I'm going to change the title to Saint and Greavesy. He said, you've always been known as a Saint. He said, he's always known as Greavesy. So we said, no, we fought it. We said, Bob, don't do that. We don't want a show to be called after us, it makes us look as if we're big time Charlies. He said, no, I want it to happen. And he took it upstairs, and the bosses upstairs said, yeah, okay. So they changed the title to Saint Greavesy against our best wishes. But that's how it stuck, and we carried on with that. And the show sort of grew, and people enjoyed it, and we had a great viewing figure, and it became a little bit of a cult thing. And we really enjoyed doing it, because we would look at the offbeat things in football. We wouldn't always just say, well, here's a goal from last week, which was the BBC way of doing it. We did our own thing, and we were always looking for characters. We were always looking for the offbeat story. Non-league teams, Highland League teams, you name it. And then people got really into it, and they would be sending us stuff and sending things for Jimmy to wear, and daft hats and t-shirts and you name it. And the public were really involved in our show. They became very much part of it, and it was very successful, and it ran a long time until ITV lost a contract to Sky for the Saturday football, and for some reason they decided, well, we won't be able to sustain a Saturday lunchtime programme, which was a load of nonsense. But anyway, that was their decision, so they pulled the plugs on us. I think the success of the programme was a lot to do with the fact that we had a Cockney and a Scotsman. Jimmy played for England, I played for Scotland. We had this rivalry at club level where he played with the great Tottenham team, I played with Liverpool. Jimmy would have the thing about the Scottish goalkeepers. He was always taking the mickey out of Scottish goalkeepers, which used to upset the Scots. And they never realised it was all tongue-in-cheek. He was just having a laugh. But so many Scots would get riled about this, not me, you're Greavesy on about that, you're goalkeepers, Jimmy and I are two different types of guys, and I think that's what helps the mix as well. We're not similar in any way. And we don't socialise because Jimmy lives in Essex and I live up on Merseyside, and we would only see each other when we work. It's hard to define what chemistry is between a working partnership on television, but whatever it is, it worked for us, and I don't think either of us wanted to delve into that. We just thought, well, if people are enjoying it, great, and we'll work away until the day comes when people switch off, because on television, that is the criteria. If they don't like it, they switch off. But we'd always kept a very good audience our levels were always high, so I don't think we'd sort of run our course. Football in the 60s was probably the best time in the last 50 years, because the whole change was there, very evident in the 60s. We were now playing with a lovely white ball that was, you could knock it around, whereas before in the 50s we were still playing with those big heavy, what do you call them again? Tomlinson T was the one that we played at Liverpool, and it had these big T panels. It was a Scottish made ball, and Shanks used to buy this ball, Tomlinson T, and if you headed the ball really hard, it left a big T imprint on your forehead, which was a bit embarrassing when you went out at night. You're trying to look nice and suave, and you've got a big T stamped on your forehead. But in the 60s, the white ball came in and everybody started using it. The boots changed from the old Mansfield Hotspurs with the big hard toes that we played in the 50s. They had gone, and we started getting these lovely light shoes, which was great. The gear, the jerseys became lighter, shorts, everything. So, it was a whole new image through the 60s. And the maximum wage was lifted, so footballers were at last taken out the dark ages of the maximum wage, which was £20 in England. So lads now were getting a decent wage, and the Stars, Johnny Haynes was the first player to get £100 a week from Fulham. Now we at Liverpool got £100 a week, but we had to do a lot of things to get our £100. We had to be in the top six in the league. We had to be getting gates of over 27,000 before we got £1 a thousand over that figure. And if we were in the top six, then we got £2 a thousand. And we had to win our game. We got £4 for winning it. And we had appearance money of a tenner, and we had a wage of about £35. So we got £35, tenner for appearance, £4 for a win, £1 a thousand, but £2 a thousand if we were in the top six. So we really had to be in the top six, filling the ground, winning the game to get £100. When Johnny Haynes could walk into Fulham and get £100 a week. So that was the difference between Johnny and the rest of us. But all the teams, the Manchester United team, were only getting about £100 a week. That's Bobby Charlton, Dennis Law, George Best, all those great players, Paddy Crane, Nobby Stiles. Because Shanks and Matt Busby and Don Revie at Leeds, and I think Billy Nicholson down at Tottenham, all these old managers had got together and said, now look, let's not go mad with this maximum wage being lifted here. Forget Fulham handing out £100 a week to Johnny Haynes. They kept the rest of us, on a level that you would get around £100 a week. Maybe some clubs pay a little bit more, but you really had to be doing well to get it. And Dennis Law would have told me that at Manchester United they had to fight like mad to get anything over £100. And this was when, they were mega stars, him and George and Bobby. And Greaves, he said, that was the same thing down at Tottenham. And every year they would go in and battle away to try and get another little bit of a rise out of the managers. And he told a good story, Greaves, about Cliffy Jones. Cliffy had been away with the Welsh team on a close season tour and had done really well, and he had been voted the best winger in the world. So when he came back, they were down in the White Hat pub, and he was saying, I should be on the same money as you and Danny Blanchflower and Dave Mackay. And that. So Greaves said, yeah, so you should. He said, go in and tell Bill Nick you want a rise. And he said, you think so? He said, yeah. So the lads convinced him that he should go up there, knock on the door, go in and say to him, look, boss, I'm the best winger in the world, and I deserve to be in the same money as the rest of them. So they rehearsed it in the pub, and off he went. And sure enough, he knocks on the door, goes in, says his line to Billy Nicholson, and Billy, who was writing at the time, looked up and he said, well, that's your opinion. Shut the door on the way out. Cliffy never got his wage rise. But that's the way it was in the 60s. Nobody was making mega money. But the football was great, because all the teams had big name players, good players. The standard of the league was terrific, because I don't think you could say that there was although we were winning the championship a couple of times, Man U would win it, Everton would win it, Leeds. It was shared around. There was nobody really dominating. There was always different teams winning things, and the depth of the league in terms of quality teams was really high. I mean, it was really good teams all the way down to the bottom of the league, and it was just a great time, and it was very enjoyable with the fans, the singing, the whole thing. No violence. when I say there was a lot of good players and good teams, all you had to look, it was a great Tottenham team who did the double in the early 60s. Now, they were a fantastic team. Great individual players. Now, Greasy didn't play with that team. He just joined them from Milan and joined them after that. But he was an added bonus for them, so they got another great player to that team. But they didn't win the league after that, funnily enough. They won the Cup a couple of times, Cup Winners' Cup. But they had great players, with Dave Mackay and Danny Blanchflower and Cliffy Jones and Johnny White. They're a super team. But you could look at Manchester United, the team they had. You look at the Chelsea boys. Chelsea had a smashing team. Arsenal, always a good side, the Arsenal. Always hard to beat, but they had quality players as well. Leicester City had a good side. Stoke City were one of the teams in the 60s that, under Tony Waddington, he would always go out, Tony, and get the real quality players from other sides, maybe just with a year or so to go in their careers. I mean, he even brought Stanley Matthews back and played Stanley, and he would go and get them all from the other teams, and they were a terrific team. The problem was that they were all getting towards a veteran stage and maybe couldn't sustain it for a whole season to win the league, but you could catch them on their day and they would give you a right chasing because they had all good players, real stars they were. I mean, our great rivals in Liverpool were Everton, and they also had a very good side. I mean, Everton won the Cup in '66. They won the league as well. I remember us playing them in the Charity Shield, which was in 1966, start of the 66-7 season. And England had just won the World Cup. Ray Wilson had played in it, Roger Hunt had played in it, of course, and we came out to play the Charity Shield, which was played at the Champions Ground. And we came out with the Cup, FA Cup, the League Championship, and the World Cup. And Roger and Ray Wilson paraded the World Cup round the ground, and we paraded the other two trophies. So Liverpool, that day, really had everything. The World Cup and the two major trophies in British football. And it was a great day, a great Charity Shield. And we won it. Roger, I think, scored the goal, and we won it 1-0. Bob Paisley was our trainer and became the manager of the club. When Shanks resigned and he didn't want the job, Bob told me after it, he said, I said, Bill, have 6 months away if you want a break from it. He said, I'll try and keep it going. Shanks said, no, Bob, I'm finished, and that was it. So Bob then reluctantly got the job and went on to become the most successful football manager in the history of British football. And Bob had won 19 trophies in 9 years. It was absolutely phenomenal. And here was a man that didn't even want a job. But he told me a nice story, Bob. He said, when Shanks was clearing his desk out, the phone rang, so Bob answered the phone, and he said, Bill, he says, Adidas on the phone. He said, they want to know, would you accept a golden boot for your services to football? Now, Shanks being a good Scotsman, went, a golden boot, Bobby? Yes, tell him I'll accept it. By the way, I take a size 13. Shanks was very strict with us, when it came to drinking. He never drank himself. He used to always sell a bit of tomato juice. But he didn't like the lads drinking. And we were always very conscious of this, and nobody would abuse it. We'd have a few drinks on the train coming back from away games. When we played in London, we always went by train, and we'd have a few lagers with a meal. And the old conductors there coming on the train, all the scousers, would slip us a few things under the table, would keep them away from Shanks, and we'd be playing cards and having a few beers all under the table. When he came walking up, how's the game going, like the cards, and we'd say, all right, boss. The beers were all under the table. So we didn't like to abuse the fact. We knew that he didn't like us drinking. But he liked the cards, he loved the cards, because his home in Scotland was a little mining village, and all the miners would play cards. And when he was playing at Preston, he'd go back home in the summer, and he used to tell us that he would play cards with the miners, and they'd all have their betting rings and would sit and play cards. And he said, if you have a good day, he said, you'd go home with the 10 bob notes, as it were, the pound notes, he said, all crushed up in your hand, and you'd throw them on the table and say to your mother, would you iron them for me, I'm going out tonight. So his mother would iron the 10 bob notes, the pound notes. But he would play, he said, play football and play cards in the summer. That's what he did when he'd pass his time when he went back home. So he liked joining in with the lads playing cards, and they used to play various games, but the poker, they liked poker, and they liked brag, 3-card brag. So they're playing 3-card brag, and we were on the way to Newcastle, so the gambling school was usually Tommy Smith, Chrissy Lawler, Ronnie Yates, Bobby Graham, and Shanks would join in. And I never really bothered, play the odd game of cards, whatever, but I like to have a read, and have a chat with the lads and get a laugh, watch the card players, and, see who's winning, who's losing. But Shanks is involved in this game, and it started getting a bit warm, this game, because they started going blind, where somebody would not look at their hand. So if it was like, say, 2 bob to go, when you're looking at your hand, you only put 1 shilling in because you were going blind. So everybody's paying double that you are. But they had got up, the school hadn't got up and up till they were going pounds. You see, they were going pound blind. So you had to have £2 in to see. So this particular hand is going round and round, and Bobby Graham had not looked at his, and Shanks had not looked at his. So both of them are going blind. The rest of the lads are all going until they fall out of it. So Shanks then has the first to look at his card. He looks at his cards, put them down. He said, £2. So he's seen his cards, so he knows he's got a good hand. Bobby Graham, pound blind. Shanks, £2 seeing, Bobby, pound blind. So the boss then said, Bobby's son, I'll put you out your misery. He said, 3 jacks. So he turned over 3 jacks and reached for the pot. So Bobby turned his over, and he had 3 threes. So he went 3 threes, so he dived for the pot as well. So the two of them have got their hands on the money, and they're trying to drag it off the table. And Shanks is saying, 3 jacks. And Bobby's gone, no, 3 threes, boss. So hold it. So who's won? So Shanks said, in Chicago, he said, 3 jacks win it. And Tommy Smith said, well, boss, we always play 3 threes as the highest pile. It's never that, Tommy. So they have a big argument. Anyway, Bobby Graham won the money. And Shanks had, at the end of the day, had been saying £2, didn't have the money. All his money had been put in the pot already. He didn't have any. So he owed Bobby about £6. And he said, see me on Monday. So Bobby was petrified on Monday to go into the office, because he was only a kid, like. And he thought, I've got to go in and ask. So the boys are saying, go in and ask him, get your money. He's lost his money. So we're all winding him up. So Bobby knocks on the door and comes in. I've come for my money, boss. Well, Shanks, aye, son, how much was it? I said, so he gave me £6. He says, here you are. He says, don't let me see you play cards again. Bad Bobby for playing cards again. And then he stopped him playing on the coach for money. He said, no. He said, this is getting out of hand. So the lads would then play for matches. So each match was worth £1, of course. And they just would play for matches. So when he walked up, I had a look. They were just playing for matches. But then at the end of the day, whoever had all the matches, they just boom, that's X amount. And they would all dish up the money when they get out of the coach. Nobody knows the real reason why he retired. And he was only retired, 6 months, and I was talking to him, and he said, the man that invented the word retirement should have been shot. He said, it's terrible. He had nothing to do with his time. All he did was, sit around the house, cut his grass, go down the training ground at Everton, which was right next to him. He'd go and watch them train, and that's how bad things were for him. He'd go there, take his dog, take a walk around there, go to the games at night. But he felt at the end that he'd made this big mistake of retiring, and he still had lots to offer, and he really was so frustrated about it. John Toshak, when he went to Swansea, John used to invite him down and invite him to games that were playing, and he would go and give them little talks, and John tried to make him feel still part of the game, which I thought was nice. And I remember going to a game over at Wigan. Swansea were playing, and Shanks was there, and he liked that. He enjoyed that, and I think at Tranmere they would invite him over there. But he always must have felt in a way that he was interfering, and he didn't want to be saying too much. And really, what I think should have happened to Bill Shankly was that Liverpool Football Club should have made him a director. He should have been invited onto the board the way Joe Mercer was at Manchester City. And I think that would have been the way Matt was at Manchester United. And I think that would have been it. He would have been a member of the board of directors. He would have had a position in the game when he was still attached to Liverpool club. And of course, by being a director, then they could have said, well, Bill, of course, you don't go to the training ground, because that's what he was doing when he retired. At first, he was going down the training ground, and Bob, who was in charge then, felt a little bit inhibited because the lads were still calling Shanks boss. But Bob was a new boss, and it was compromising Bob's position. But I think had the club said, you're on the board, I think that would have solved the problem, and I think Shanks would have had a position that would have suited him, and he would have represented the club at anything. You know, if the club needed somebody to go and represent them at a meeting here or something there, then the boss could have gone and done it for them, and he'd have been a great ambassador for the football club. But as it was, he was left in limbo, and I remember going to the European Cup final in Paris. We were there, and I went to the game with him. We sat in the coach going to the game, and here was a man who, you know, had been in charge of teams in cup finals, and he was going to the game just as a specky, had nothing to do with the club. And afterwards we came back, and we got to the hotel, and obviously I went out and had a few drinks, celebrate the victory. Liverpool had beaten Real Madrid. The next morning I'm talking to the boss again, and his voice had gone. I said, hey boss, what's been happening? I said, you weren't out singing last night, were you? He said, no son, he said, everybody wants to talk to me. So he'd been standing probably in the foyer all night talking to Liverpool fans about the game and the victory and everything else, and he lost his voice talking. Everybody wanted to talk to him, and I just felt that he was a man that was lost in Paris. He was lost. He was not part of the club on such a great night. He should have been there. He should have been with the team as part of the club, as a director of the club. And that position was something that I felt that Liverpool let him down, and I think they let the fans down by not making him a director, because the fans wanted Shanks to be part of that club, because he was the man that built the club. He took them from the ashes of the second division when they were just a non-entity club and took them to the top, gave them the glory years, set the standards for all the teams that followed our team in the 60s. He set those standards. And Bob Paisley said a lovely thing about him. He said, Shanks built the foundations of this football club. He says, and all I did was just put the roof on it, which I thought was a nice way of putting it.
If you've enjoyed this Ian St John tape, you'll also enjoy another in our series with Alan Hansen.